for starters, so thank you, Chief French, for being a part of this. I also want to thank Captain Simmons for being a part of this. For Officer, all right, one more time, Bim. How do you pronounce your last name?
Therriault.
Therriault for being with us. I see a Lieutenant Mullenburn. Is that how you pronounce your name?
Yes, sir.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you, Lieutenant, for being with us as well. And then thank you, everybody who's part of the community for being a part tonight. So we just want to have good discussion. Let's see, I'm admitting another person here who's just hopping on. If you have questions, if you could just throw those questions in the chat area, I can field those. But I thought that we would start off tonight. We're here because there's been a group of people put together called Reimagining Public Safety, the Reimagining Public Safety Community Task Force. And they are charged with making, oh, we got more people being admitted here. They're charged with coming up with some ideas on how to restructure RPD. And so before I start taking lots of so I'm hitting admit, but some people they're not joining. Before we start fielding questions, I thought we could just ask Chief French and our other officers just if they could start off by kind of sharing their thoughts on this whole reimagining process that's going on, and maybe enlighten some of us that don't know your perspective or the details of what's occurring. Chief French, would you like to go first?
Sure. So I think I was asked here to talk about kind of the proposal of the Reimagining Task Force. So I'll talk first, just kind of giving you an overview. The Reimagining Task Force, Reimagining Public Safety Task Force was put together by the City Council last year. It's a 21-member task force. Each City Council member was able to nominate 3 people to serve on the task force. And so the task force has been meeting since last year, I think for probably like the last 8 months or so. And they've been doing a lot of hard work in trying to reimagine what public safety should look like here in the city of Richmond. And so I know that they worked hard on their proposals. I think that they have some really good proposals, but obviously, you know, there's some that are in conflict with what I'm trying to do in the police department. I'm sure we'll talk about those things a little bit later. But I think that we're living in a very pivotal time. I believe, yeah, every day brings an opportunity for us to look at social change. And I think that all involves in doing very difficult but necessary work of first acknowledging the harms that law enforcement has caused the community, and really working with the community to right those harms. And to do that, we have to have strong community policing here in the community, within our city. And I think that we need to work together on what that policing should look like for our community. I think that I have a lot of great officers that do their best and want the best for the people here in our community. And it's my job to help them to do the right thing by making sure that I'm proactively training officers to de-escalate situations, by ensuring that community members are heard and responded to and share their thoughts about the police department, and by holding officers accountable when they violate the civil liberties of any community member, regardless of their color, race, gender, sexual orientation, or anything that puts them in a disadvantage. So I'm sure we'll get into more of the details of the Reimagining Task Force as we go along, but that's kind of where I see things and where I see the task force and the police department, hopefully at some point working together towards these changes.
Yeah. All right. Captain Simmons, do you want to add anything to that?
Sure. I'll just, again, thank you for the invitation to be here, and just for everyone's benefit, I kind of have a dual role. I'm a member of Chief French's senior command staff team. I'm a police captain that commands our investigations bureau. But tonight I'm here also as our Police Management Association president. The Police Management Association represents all of our lieutenants and all of our captains. We're the only collective bargaining union, so to speak, for those particular job classifications. So kind of have a unique perspective, as does Officer Therriault, Ben. He's got that same perspective, and I'll let him introduce himself in a little bit here. But I just want to say that I've been a member, an appointee, a staff member appointee that Chief French appointed as staff to the task force, just to be a resource. Not participate in the development of anything, not participate in the voting process, but to be a resource to the task force if they've got questions about the police department, if they need statistical data or any other support getting information that they may need to help better inform them as they make their decisions. In my observations of the task force, I will say it's been a strong collaborative process. They have reached to several different corners of the community and have had some really spirited discussions amongst themselves. And I don't envy their charge in that it's a difficult topic and a large challenge for them to bite into what it is they've been asked to do. And I think that they've been a very committed group of task force members that have worked really, really hard to get to where they are today. I echo Chief French and what she stated, and that I also agree that many of the recommendations they're coming up with are outstanding and are in line with exactly what I would see as being a path forward for law enforcement in terms of acknowledging the harm that's gone on in communities through law enforcement through the decades, and taking certain functions of law enforcement away from their response or our response and putting them in other circles where it best fits and meets the needs. You know, for a long time, law enforcement has been the catch-all, end-all to every problem, so to speak, in society, because who else is 24 hours a day, 7 days a week besides the police? So it's nice to see a shift in some of that. And then on the other hand, Richmond PD has always been a strong advocate of community policing and community-oriented policing. And I do have some fears and concerns that there could be some dismantling of that strong community-oriented policing model that I know that Chief French has put into place and desires to see happen within RPD, and that as a union leader, I believe and captain, I believe that our community deserves nothing but the best. And I'm happy to discuss what my viewpoints are on the best.
Awesome. All right, so I look forward to hearing some of those things. Officer Therriault, would you like to introduce yourself and add anything to that?
Sure. I won't beat down a lot of things that have already been said, but I agree with both Captain Simmons and the Chief on their statements. The work that the task force has done has been very important, and it has, I think, a very long-term good potential for the city and how we do things in a different way. Many of us, including those of us who actually do the job and work in law enforcement, have wanted to see this kind of shift for some time, and I think there's definitely a good pathway forward to that, but it involves balance, and the implementation is the most important thing, because without correct implementation, public safety is here for the right reasons. It's just the pathway right there. And I'm looking forward to talking about that, and looking forward to speaking on all these issues tonight.
That's great.
And I'll just add, I was actually on the task force, or I am still on it as a participant.
Okay.
Well. Thanks.
Okay, great. So you can obviously bring some insights there. I said earlier, if anybody has a question that they'd like to pose, if you throw it in the chat, I can help kind of sift that. Sometimes you get some of the same questions or similar questions, and so we can ask just one question rather than the same question over and over. And then as well, if everybody, just so that we can hear and there's not background chatter, if everybody can mute themselves, unless when they're talking, obviously, unmute yourself, that would be great. So I want to get in this. We're going to move towards the specifics of reimagining. Sorry, I'm looking at questions as well. I'm going to get into the specifics of the reimagining, but just kind of as a general overview, right? It seems, this is a cultural moment where our society has really changed their view of the police. Years back, culturally, we saw the police as protectors, peacemakers. Now, many see officers as threatening their peace and their safety. And so, what are the policies or strategies RPD is beginning to implement to change that perception? And is part of this reimagining, are there things that are part of this reimagining program that fit into that help everybody go, okay, I can trust the police. I feel like they've got my best interest at heart. Anybody, Chief French, do you want to?
Sure. I'll start off. So the good thing is that for the last 10 to 15 years, we've had really progressive police chiefs, even before myself. And so we were on the forefront of making a lot of changes and implementing a lot of policies that were cutting edge for law enforcement. So, as we talk about de-escalation training, and which is being brought up nationwide, we've literally been doing de-escalation training for many years now, probably 8 to 10 years. We've been focusing on de-escalation training. And in fact, every time we do training, whether it be, firearms training or hand-on-hand combat training, we always have de-escalation as part of that training. So we've incorporated into all of our training. So besides that, even our policies and what we've implemented in the police department over the years have been really innovative, cutting edge, and things that have been adopted across the country because of our model and specifically our community policing model. So, so when all of this happened, it wasn't like we had to catch up and we had to all of a sudden do a bunch of things to come in line with what the communities were asking for. We were already doing a lot of the things. We did have some wording changes in our policy just to be more in line with what people were asking for. So like I talked about, we did de-escalation training for many years, but we didn't actually have a de-escalation policy within our training. De-escalation wasn't spelled out in our policies. So we added that to our policies. In addition, I've implemented some things in-house. We're starting a cultural competency training so that the people within our agency and the people that I'm hiring coming on have some more integrated training, cultural competencies training specific to the city of Richmond. So we know that there's been harms done here within our city, the history in the 70s with the cowboys, just different things that have happened over the past. And I think it's important that we teach the people coming to work here about those harms, because we still hear from the community about how those things affected them and their families. So it's important that they know, and so that we can act accordingly and that we acknowledge that and we make sure that we have policies in place so that those things don't happen moving forward. So we've done a lot of things. We're continuing to do a lot of things around reform. But again, I think we've been at the cutting edge of implementing these things early on.
Yeah, that's very good. Thank you. Captain Simmons, you want to?
Yeah, I'll just add to what the chief just said, just in two other areas. One, look no further than the mission statement. So when Chief French was sworn in as the permanent chief, two things that were immediately a priority. One was looking at our mission statement. The other one was looking at our core values and understanding that everything we do as an organization, from expecting officers, expecting from the top down, herself as the chief, all the way down through her command staff, all the way down to the line level officers, how they're expected to hold themselves is codified within the context of of the mission statement found within RPD. And it is very explicit in that it says to create strategic partnerships with a diverse community to solve problems. You know, the expectation from the most pivotal point of what the department is all about has to do with relationship building, understanding we have a diverse community, understanding we want officers, sergeants, lieutenants, captains, even the chief's own expectations for herself, that we are solving problems and that we're not just putting band-aids on issues. And I know at times it can seem that way. An officer responds to a call, then they're gone. But the expectation is that there's follow-up and there's follow-through, and that if it's a quality of life issue, that we're helping people navigate the resource pool that could be found within the city, because we are the only 365 7-day-a-week organization within the city. We want our officers solving problems and helping connect people to resources that's going to help move them in a direction towards a better life, a more peaceful life. So you may not always see that, because what you see is the traffic stop, you see the pedestrian stop, you see something, but not realizing that really there's a lot more follow through and intricacies that are connected to that interaction, that are really codified right within our own mission statement of understanding that we have a diverse community. It's a priority that we are developing relationships, that we're solving problems. And then the other thing I would say that goes to even the cutting edge part of what the chief was just talking about, we've even looked to leverage technology to provide more transparency. As recent as this last city council meeting, the chief has presented a program through an organization called, our company called Policing Strategies, that is going to make all of our use of force a public platform. So the public will be able to see, how often does RPD use force? Not just how often, what are the circumstances that precipitate the force? Which officers are engaged in force? And what does that tell us as a community about this individual? Just because an officer is engaged in use of force, it doesn't necessarily have a negative connotation to it, but it really presents the whole picture, so that as a community member, you can really look at your department, your police department, and understand, hey, these are the hot topics right now. These are the things that we feel like maybe are used disparately, and we could actually look at that, and it's transparent. It'll be available for the public to navigate and see and experience. That's cutting edge stuff. That most police departments do not put that kind of information out there on Front Street, and that's been a priority for the chief to really say, listen, the mission is going to be this, and then our practice and what we actually do is going to marry up with what we're saying our mission is. So I think that is also something that makes us very unique.
And so what is mission in practice? Like, if you what is
so
mission?
Yeah, I mean, I would say mission has been what the chief has said. This is what I want the department to look like and what I want you to strive for. And then practice is going to be the everyday measurable occurrences that we can look at as supervisors and managers to say, are we attaining that mission? Are we on the road that's leading us the direction that the chief has laid out for us to go? If not, where are we missing that mark? And what do we need to do to self-correct to get back onto that road, to get back into that path? And there are several metrics that are used to look at that. Some of them are internal, where we look at a lot of things internally. And then many of them are external, where we're engaged with, like the RNCC. I mean, every RNCC, every month, Lieutenant Molenburn is on there, I'm on there, the chief is on there, Officer Therriault is on there, and we're looking for that community feedback. And that's just one example when I say RNCC, but there's many of those on the outside where we're looking for that feedback, whether it's through CPRC or the RNCC, other neighborhood councils, where we can get a sense if we are hitting that mark, if we're on that road of fulfilling what the mission is, or if there's some areas we need to look at and say, hey, we have to tweak this. We're missing it here. It's not a one-shot, one-time evaluation. It's all the time. It's every meeting.
Gotcha. And it sounds like what you were talking about, the example that you used about kind of putting force front and center. So it sounds like one of the things that is a priority is transparency.
Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's see.
Can you let more people in the meeting, please?
There's only one who just wanted, and I just let them in. So
No, there's another one.
I just admitted the only one that I could see. So so everybody that I can see that wants in is in. Officer Therriault, would you want to add anything else to that? And then also, if you could, somebody did ask a question a while ago, which was just what is the definition of community policing? And so I don't know if you can answer that, and also if you had anything else you wanted to say to what has been talked about.
Sure. Well, I'll talk about community policing. I mean, community policing is essentially, ensuring that your organization, your police department, is working within the community and forming community partnerships, and then with those partnerships, problem solving in accordance to what the community's wants and needs are. And so that means, but it means working with across the spectrum with many different folks. As different people within the community have different needs. There's no monoliths. So you have different government agencies, you have community groups, members, nonprofits, service providers, businesses, sometimes the media. There's lots of different groups that you can work with. And, by working with those groups, those people and their input, and then you form, policing policies and strategies based off of that. And that, it transforms the organization, continually, because those things, wants and needs change within the community. And that working together with those people and those different types of stakeholders, if you will, is what changes the problem solving and ensuring that you're doing the right thing in community policing. So that's kind of it in a quick nutshell. And that's something that, like I said, might be different 5, 10, 20 years ago. It might be different 5, 10, 20 years from now, but it's something that evolves and changes.
Gotcha. How is it that you guys identify community needs? Is it primarily through neighborhood councils? What's your connection with the community, would you say? Chief French, do you want to answer that?
Yeah, it's through many different ways. So historically, we've had officers attend every single neighborhood council that we have here in the city. They provide statistics, and then they also receive information from the community about what the community feels is important for us as police officers to handle, and how we can partner together to solve those community issues. But not only with just neighborhood councils, it's with the businesses, like Officer Therriault described, working with a lot of different groups. And so I think it's important to hear from, schools and from the community on what the issues are. And then additionally, we use statistics. So we use data to inform where crimes are occurring, what's happening. And again, we use that data to inform the community, as well as to work with the community on addressing those crime issues.
Gotcha. Thank you, Chief. I appreciate that. Sorry, there's been kind of a discussion about money the city received for COVID and things like that. I don't know that those are specifically pertinent to this discussion. And I'm sorry, it sounds like somebody, a neighborhood council person or president is trying to get on, but I am not seeing anybody else, just so that you know. We've talked about this reimagining. You've said there's some good things. You said that there's maybe some things that aren't necessarily with your vision, Chief. So, let's get into a little bit more of the details. Is RPD looking at changing their techniques of policing? What are the changes you're looking at making?
So I had to make some changes already this year due to the budget issues that we had as a city. So during that budget process, I should say last year, during the budget cycle last year, we lost 34 positions, and that was sworn and non-sworn positions. So that brought us down to 157 authorized police officer positions. And because of that, I had to make some changes in how we provide services to the public. With the reduction in staffing, we had to reduce our services. So, you know, we're just kind of getting through that. And now with the recommendations of the task force, I'm looking at ways that we would potentially implement you know, our services with an additional reduction in staffing. And so again, I want to say that I am in favor of many of the recommendations that the task force is putting forward, because I think that they're good recommendations, and I think that over time it'll have a positive effect on our community. But I think that we also need to have a balanced approach in how we get there. And obviously, you know, the issue that I have is with the defunding of the police department. And so I think that the impacts that we're going to see as a community are longer response times, because the, you know, reducing, and I should say also, you know, and looking at their numbers, and I know that they're, you know, we provided some numbers to the task force, as well as they're getting numbers off of the internet. But in looking at the numbers that they presented a recommendation of a reduction of 25 police officers, and then recommendations of other cuts within the police department. And just looking at the other cuts, I don't think that we would actually get to that $10 million number that they're looking for. So I think that there would actually need to be more police officers cut, probably more like 35 police officers cut, to be able to save the amount of money and redirect the amount of funds that they want to direct. And so if we were to have to do that, then we would lose several units within the department. That would be most likely our traffic unit, most of our investigative units, our community violence reduction team, our regulatory unit. We wouldn't do any follow-up investigations on most crimes, including property crimes. The property detectives that we would have would be only maybe a couple of detectives that will basically only take in custody reports and send them to the district attorney's office, and we wouldn't do any follow-up on any other property crimes. And then obviously we'll continue to investigate homicides and shootings, but I'm not sure what level of an investigation we would do for those types of crimes. So there will be some significant things that the community, I think, will see in real time. I have a whole list of, you know, things that I'm looking at, you know, as we look at these cuts. We probably wouldn't respond to a lot of calls that we currently respond to. And as the other groups get up and running, they might be able to take on some of these calls that we're no longer responding to, like violations of orders, annoying, harassing phone calls, loitering calls, certain things that we have actually turned to online reporting because of the budget cuts that we saw last year. So there's already things that we're not responding to, like identity theft, lost property, thefts. If your car is broken into, we ask you to go online to make a report. So we'd be asking a lot more of those online reporting things. So there are significant things that the public will see that will be different.
Yeah. Captain Simmons, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I'll just add, you know, we're already in a situation today where trying to stay connected, and I'll speak from an investigation standpoint, wanting to do the kind of follow-up that we know a case deserves, or we know that a crime victim family deserves, in terms of staying connected with them and having some of the follow through and the regular communication. Because of the reductions that have happened through the years, there's been a choice of, okay, do we have these detectives focus on trying to solve the crime, or do we have them stay focused on staying connected to some of these families that really deserve it and really need it? And we haven't been able to do both. And in a lot of cases, it's been really heartbreaking, especially sitting on some of these groups where we have multiple homicide victim families, you know, who have been victimized over the years, lost loved ones. and the connectivity that they've used to have with us when we had a robust staff. They have not had that because we have not had the staff to maintain that level of relationship. And really, that's really disappointing. And it's really something that I wish we could get back to. I just want to remind folks that in September of 2015, at the time, U.S. Attorney General Loretta Lynch visited Richmond PD. And I just want to read something really quick. U.S. Attorney General Loretta Lynch says that her decision to visit Richmond PD has something to do with its troubled past, but most importantly, with its bright future and their ongoing efforts to improve relationships between police and the community. Quote, "It's clear to me that Richmond is working towards really a holistic and comprehensive approach to public safety, and RPD is in the middle of that," end quote. So we're not that far off from that viewpoint of a national leader recognizing RPD as the standard to move towards as police departments throughout the country. And she's used RPD many times as the gold standard of this is where we need to go. Over these last few years, we've regressed in terms of not philosophy, not vision, and not mission, but in terms of the resources needed to maintain that kind of progress that she outlines on the national stage. I would really like to see the city of Richmond do all these things that are being talked about in the Reimagine Public Safety. They're phenomenal. They all need to happen. I don't see it as one or the other. I see it as we have to find a way to maintain this strong community policing RPD that Richmond has come to know and love, and to continue to bolster all these other resources and redirect certain things to continue to make Richmond a healthy place to live, work, and play. And we just need to come together to find a way to make it happen. I think it's possible.
Officer Therriault, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I'll add greatly on that. It's essential that we continue to be able to serve the public in the manner that I think they deserve. I quite frequently lament at the lack of services within different parts of not only West County for here, but also different parts of the county in general, from Richmond to other cities. And I think people here deserve a robust and adequate 911 response. And it is very hard to maintain that. And that's a huge problem. People deserve that. And one of the things that would be affected with such a dramatic loss in personnel without a marketable plan that would be put in place, one of the things that would be affected would be that response dramatically, and the type of service that people have come to expect. And I think that's unfortunate, because there's this kind of false choice that's being put forward, is that we can only do one or the other. And that's not true. We can do both. There's a way to do that, and we need to find a way to make that happen, because that's what the people in Richmond deserve. And that's the whole problem with the premise that we can only do one or the other. And that's not true.
Gotcha. So I want to get back to, just because somebody's posted it, it's Marina Brown has said, she thinks that the COVID money, I guess the cities received some COVID money, is extremely important. It could save 25 officers. How confident are the police officers in regard to this money actually going to the task force programs they're passing on to the city council? So I think what they're saying is, like, if the city takes money from you, is that money actually going to go to the programs that are suggested? And also, that this COVID money could save officers. I realize you're the police department, you're not the city council, you're not the mayor. So you really, I'm sure you can advocate for these things, but there's not a whole lot you can do. Do you want to speak to that, Chief French, at all? Oh, you're muted. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Sure. So the city is getting some funding relief for COVID-19 that I would advocate can go to some of these programs that are being suggested by the Reimagining Committee, and I would advocate for, as well as other funding like Measure X funding that the voters passed last year. I would also recommend us looking for grants and other opportunities to fund some of these opportunities, so that I could, save the officers that I have working in the department. But I think the Reimagining Task Force has been very clear that they want this money to come from the police department, and specifically they want a reduction in police officer staff. So.
And just to clarify, say again, how many officers do you have currently on RPD?
So we are currently authorized 157 sworn officers. At our height of our staffing, and I think when we had the lowest amount of homicides here in the city, we had 203 officers. So we're down to 157. Of those 157 officers, we have 17 officers that are off on injury leave or long-term leave or on light duty. So they're not able to actually go out there and patrol the street. So when you take that down, we're significantly understaffed.
That's 140 if my math is right. So, yeah. One of the things, let's see. So there's another question here that's kind of in line with what we're talking about. Can you give us some details on what the reallocation of the police budget will potentially go to? I have in front of me, I think, some of that, but I don't know, any of you want to share that? Either Captain Simmons or Police Chief or Officer Therriault, do you know any of those particulars?
So I do know, just from the proposal that I listened to last night from the task force, they're looking at $2.5 million to the Office of Neighborhood Safety. That's ONS, $1.93 million to Richmond Works Summer Youth Program. That would be able to hire 1,200 youth for jobs here in Richmond in the summer. And $2.445 million to Community Crisis Response Programs. And I believe that was the community mental health response. And $3.4 million to SOS Richmond, which is an organization, ironically, that I believe we as a police department first started funding to help with homeless services here in Richmond. And basically they employ unhoused people to help clean up the areas that the unhoused are staying in.
Gotcha. So that would be a cut of 15% if I'm not, am I correct in that? That's it would basically, they'd reallocate $10.28 million, which is 15% of your budget.
That's correct.
So I want to head into how that would affect public safety in Richmond. But before we go there, in case people don't know, so being a pastor here in the community, one of the things that I hear oftentimes, the grumblings of people is that, man, the police response time is really slow or long, or we call 911 and it just takes a really long time. And so can you explain, because maybe there's people who don't know, the beat system that you guys have in place, and maybe explain why sometimes those calls take such a long time for there to be a response?
Sure. So we have our city, the way we break it up is we have three districts. We have the Northern District, the Southern District, and the Central District. Each district has 3 beats that we staff at all times. So for 3 districts, 3 beats, that's 9 beats for the entire city that we have to staff at all times. So for instance, at 7 o'clock in the morning when our day shift comes on, they're the only officers working. They each staff one of the beats. So there's 9 officers working and 2 supervisors. So for instance, I know you're in the Hilltop area, Pastor Loren. So from all the way from Parchester Village, all the way to through El Sobrani and into Carriage Hills, that is 2 beats 8 and 9. So you have only 2 officers working that entire area. Yeah. then beat 7 is also a large area. That's the North and East District. Then you come into the central districts and you have beats 4, 5, and 6, which is the Belding Woods area, the central Richmond Iron Triangle, and North Richmond neighborhoods. And then beats 1, 2, and 3 are the Southern District. So for any given time, you have 9 beat officers working the entire city. So it takes a long time for us to respond to calls because many calls that we respond to take more than one officer. So for instance, if there's a fight in Parchester Village, the beat 9 officer that works in Carriage Hills area, Deanza, is going to come all the way to Parchester to cover that officer on a call, even a domestic violence call. You know, most calls there are going to be 2 officers that respond together. And then, you know, 9 officers is not a lot of officers to cover the entire city. If there's a traffic accident, a lot of times you need, you know, officers to direct traffic. You need more than one officer to be there for a traffic accident. So a lot of times officers are tied up on calls. And so, you know, those non-emergency calls are going to just stack up and wait until an officer can respond. Now, if we lose additional officers and we lose these additional teams, as I discussed, we won't have a traffic unit. We won't have, you know, all these other teams that kind of supplement patrol officers right now. So for instance, if there's a major car accident right now, the beat officer will respond, but and then our traffic unit will come and take over so that the beat officer could get back to responding to regular calls on the beats, because doing a traffic investigation takes quite a long time. They could be there for an hour or a couple hours, depending on the severity of the accident. So there's, you know, units to kind of supplement right now. When we lose the traffic unit and lose some of these other units, it's just going to be the beat officers there. So if a beat officer has a traffic collision, they're tied up for hours, all those calls in that beat are going to wait until he or she is done with that particular call.
Wow. Wow. Captain Simmons, you want to add anything to that, or, you know, how do you see this reduction affecting public safety in Richmond?
I mean, everything the chiefs just said is absolutely spot on. The only thing I'll add to that is with the reduction of the investigations team that works solely on follow-up and investigating more detailed the crimes of significance, more of that responsibility would be diverted down to the patrol officer. So right now, the patrol officer takes a preliminary investigative report that then gets routed up to investigations. With less of an investigative team, more of that responsibility to do that follow-up would fall back on the patrol officer. So in terms of delaying them being able to get back into service, they would now be required to conduct a more thorough preliminary investigation in terms of follow-up that would otherwise there would have been support staff behind them in the way of detectives that would be doing that follow-up, because we still need the same information for the case. It's just now we don't have the same people to spread the work out to. So rather than that officer being able to take that quick report, get back into service, it would be that officer taking that report, spending time looking for other witnesses, spending time looking for cameras, seeing if there is camera, downloading that camera footage, so on and so forth, all the other follow-up investigative steps, because a more complete investigation would need to be transferred upstairs. Otherwise, there would be no follow-up done to those cases at all without having that staff. So that would be the only thing I would add as it relates to delay and public safety in terms of even the presence of police officers. I was talking to a couple of people recently. A couple of them were task force members, and some of them have expressed that just seeing the presence at times, seeing the presence of an officer drive through their neighborhood is, I know for some it's not relieving, and it triggers a certain set of emotions and feelings, and I totally understand that and respect that. But for others, there's an opposite feeling where they see it and they have a sense of peace and relief. And for these two individuals that I had spoken with, you would see a little bit less of that. because officers would be tied up on details rather than having that time to even be present of doing the regular patrols and the quality of life stuff that we task them with. You know, it's an interesting fact I just learned today from our patrol bureau captain that there's over 70 plus quality of life projects that patrol is working on right now. 70, more than 70 individual quality of life issues, and that have come up through community members expressing, hey, this is a concern, this is a problem we have, we need help addressing this. And officers have taken those projects on and are working with various community groups to get those solved. I think you would see a lot less of that happening as well.
Gotcha. I think that Officer Therriault, do you have any other anything you want to add to that? And I would say, since I'm asking you a question, somebody asked just what the overall, what the mandate of the Reimagining task force is. I noticed that somebody else put, they put some text in the chat on what it is, but do you want to, since you're part of that Reimagining group, what would you say their main purpose is? You're muted.
Sorry about that.
No,
the main purpose was that to essentially come up with a different type of plan, you know, or transition from a current, you know, from a community policing model, and to come up with something, a preferred policing model, and then a plan for implementation to that model, and submit that recommendation to council, and you know, see if there was, it's we'll look at, you know, hey, doing things differently than what we've currently been doing, necessarily to defund or take money away, but was to come up with a different policing model and a plan for implementation. And that's probably the biggest part of it, is what is the plan for implementation. I just add to Captain Simmons what he was talking about for the law, you know, changes in the beats, and officers would have to spend more. If you had a reduction in police officers, you'd have to spend a lot more time on the front end, but the quality of those investigations probably wouldn't be very good, just because cops would have to still be pressured to go move on to the next emergency call after emergency call. And without that investigative follow-up, the likelihood of victims of crime getting quality investigation into what occurred to them or happened to them and getting, you know, their justice probably would decrease a lot. And that's a problem, and that's not fair to people. The California state of California has constitutional amendment that said, you know, victims' rights must be protected, and that's important, and everyone kind of seems to miss that piece of the pie.
I just want to add one thing that kind of points to our challenges sometimes with only having 9 beat officers, and Officer Therriault could probably talk a little bit more about this. Lately, we've had a lot of issues with sideshow activity. We have upwards of 100 to 300 cars show up in Hilltop, or show up in Point Richmond, or show up on Barrett most recently, and start sideshow activity. And with only 9 officers available to respond from around the city, so it takes a little while for everybody to respond, there's just not a way that we can impact those types of problems. Oakland has, for instance, was defunded and recently refunded so that they can actually address the issues and the community concerns about sideshows and the shootings and the other violent activity that they're seeing. So, you know, while we continue to say 9 officers is minimum staffing, really 9 officers is not enough to staff a city of our size with the activity that we have here in our city.
Yeah. I want to give an opportunity. Thank you, Chief. I want to give an opportunity. Jan, our RNCC president, has had her put her hand up a little while ago. Do you have a question, Jan?
I just really wanted to, one of the things that Richmond PD did was their community safety academy, which took ordinary citizens and basically walked them through a few of the things that a police officer goes through in their time as a police officer in the city of Richmond. It was probably the most educational thing I'd ever heard about. And I've been dealing with the police for many years in the city itself, but I learned so much more about how things work and the type of training they do and how they react to different issues. It was amazing. It really was. And I was hoping this is something that they did of their own time. These officers came in and donated time to do this. And I thought it was very important. And I think if more people would do this and go through this and understand what community policing means, it's a very, I mean, this is community policing, having the community and the police department work together as one. And I just wanted, it's really something important that I would like to see continue. But if you defund them, we're not going to be able to do it. My other thing is, I was born and raised in the city. I know the history of Richmond PD, believe me. But I'm also in that senior citizen group where many of the people, probably 20 to 30% of your Richmond residents are seniors. And these people depend on the police to show up when they need them. And if you take away police officers, then these people are going to be shut-ins in their home. Somebody could die and it's 3 weeks before anybody knows they're dead because there's no one to do a welfare check. I mean, we have to really think about what we're doing here. We want to make this a safe city. We want to make this an inviting city, but we can't do that if we don't have police to help us survive. And I just, I'm doing whatever I can with the other members of the neighborhood councils to support the police department. And we're trying to get the word out that we need to talk to city council. They need to know this is not how we feel. Thanks.
Thank you, Jan. Lisa has her hands up. Before I go to her, Police Chief French, is that program that Jan talked about, is that still going at this point?
Yeah, we've had the Community Safety Academy for the last few years now. We didn't do it during 2020 because of COVID. We were hoping to restart that program this year. However, if we do lose the funds, we won't be able to start that. There's going to be certain impacts to the community policing model that we've had, which includes some of a lot of the community engagement. We will still try to do. I still believe that community engagement is very important. We'll try to do as much as we can, but unfortunately, it will lie on the shoulders of the officers working at that particular time because we have to minimize our overtime budget.
Gotcha.
Historically, we've actually, paid officers to come in on overtime to attend a lot of community functions because we wanted to ensure that there would be an officer there. When an officer is working patrol, obviously the calls for service take precedence and priority. So if an event is going on and something happens within the city, then the officers, going to that call for service as opposed to the community event. So that's why we would have officers coming in on overtime because we know how important that community engagement is.
Gotcha. Thank you. Thank you. Lisa's had her hand up for a while. Lisa, do you want to ask a question?
Sure. I'm sorry, I wasn't able to join right at the beginning, so I apologize if some of this was addressed at top. When there was the community meeting about a week ago, some of the numbers that were being presented was that they were saying 25 police department positions would be cut. I don't know if that number is still what they're saying, but it's my understanding that they aren't specifying which police calls or duties would be shifted over to any other bodies or organizations other than mental health issues. Is that number still what they're saying? Second question I have is they keep mentioning full-time equivalent staff versus of the RPD rather than the number of sworn officers. So are they distinguishing of those cuts who they say are coming from sworn officers versus non-sworn officers? And another thing that I think is important to bring into this equation is they kept saying that the percentage of the budget given to RPD is now much higher in the 80s and the 90s than it was in the 80s and 90s, excuse me. But what they failed to mention along with that statistic is that we have significantly fewer murders now than we did back then. Like we're at what, 20 per year now versus 63 in the 90s. So is RPD going to bring some of these statistics into this equation to bring some of that to this discussion? I mean, you just look at what's happened with Oakland, and they've now given them back $10 million. I don't know how much was cut, but of that 10 million, I just think there's important parts that are being missed in this discussion. And as Jan said, it's like, how can the neighborhood councils and members of those neighborhoods participate in this to bring all sides to this conversation?
Yeah. Chief, do you want to answer that question?
Sure. So the police officer positions that have been mentioned, and I from the task force on here, so if they want to jump in, feel free to. The positions that have been mentioned to be cut are specifically police officer positions. They want sworn cut, not non-sworn positions, so sworn positions. Now the numbers, my numbers don't exactly equate to what their numbers are. So they have talked about 25 police officer positions, but their breakdown of how much a police officer position isn't correct. So it would actually be more like 35 police officer positions that would amount to the $10 million that they're looking for to fund the other programs.
Which would put us at about 115 officers or something like that. So
we're at 140 right now.
There's more than that, but active duty is about 140. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Early. Yeah, absolutely. Let me ask this question because it's been posed. It's been on here for a while. Do any of the proposed programs that will receive funds transferred from the PD budget help reduce property crimes, auto burglaries, shoplifting, and other property crimes that seem to be increasing, not only in Richmond, but in statewide? So are any of the proposals, will they address some of these crime issues?
So like I said at the beginning, I think that the proposals will have a positive impact on our city over time. So when you talk about a reduction in theft and crimes and stuff like that, I think that when we do provide resources to our community, specifically the youth, and providing jobs, then they're probably less likely to engage in some criminal activity during the summer, stealing stuff or whatever, typical teenagers might get involved in. So I think that there is that would be a positive effect to fund some of these programs. But like I also said in the beginning, I think that this needs to be transitional, and I think that it's something that we need to balance and work up to.
Can I just add a comment to that too, Pastor Loren?
I was going to ask you. Yes, absolutely.
So in addition to what the chief just mentioned, I also agree that a lot of the proposals will have a positive impact and will directly affect, you start taking care of our unhoused folks. Yeah, they're not going to have that need to necessarily shoplift or steal for sustenance, or taking care of mental health. A lot of those crimes that maybe they find themselves getting involved with because of their mental health status would be averted, which is fantastic. And it's exactly the reason why we all support these proposals the way they are. What it does then for the police is allows the beat officer and the police to then start focusing on the other public safety issues that are present in the city that we haven't been able to do a great job investing in, that we haven't been able to comprehensively try to impact. For example, traffic. The city of Richmond, unfortunately, has one of the highest per capita collision rates in the state. I mean, our collisions are through the roof. It is extremely unsafe to drive a car in the city of Richmond. The amount of collisions that we have to deal with. Well, if we're not having to deal with some of these other crimes that you just mentioned, now officers have time to really impact problem targeted areas where most of these collisions are happening, to try to help drivers slow down, to intervene, and for there to not be so many collisions, we can bring that rate down. People lose their lives on an annual basis in Richmond through traffic collisions. So that's just one example of another area that falls within our purview and responsibility of addressing, that right now we're not able to do the job there that we would like to because of a lot of these other areas. And I believe that if these other areas were impacted, mental health, getting jobs for the youth, and all these other programs, the needs that they will meet, then start opening up opportunities for the officers to really impact quality of life areas, crime areas, that crime related areas that really are meant for police to respond to and intervene and prevent.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, gotcha. Officer Therriault, do you want to, Therriault, Officer Therriault, do you want to add anything to that?
Sure, Ben is fine, please, Pastor.
All right, okay, Ben.
Ben is fine.
Officer Ben.
That's fine. No, I want to say that many of the task force proposals, like I said, the vast majority of them are very good, and they have tremendous potential, and they are a good way to transition from things so that law enforcement can focus on things that are we are far more designed to do. However, it's all about the implementation and how that actually occurs, because right now, I have about a dozen people who are not going to stick around and find out whether the council will accept this and do this on July 1st. You have people putting in applications to go to other places because they are tired of the unknown. So you're looking at hundreds of years of police experience, not just any police experience, but Richmond police experience, potentially going elsewhere to other places that has been bought and paid for by the citizens of the city, and is with people who understand the expectations and of how to be a police officer in this city, what that community policing looks like, and are looking to take that elsewhere because they are, rightfully so, nervous about the outcome that might occur, whether it's 25, 35 spots. There's no plan in place, and no one has talked about how that will actually occur. And so it could just be, all right, on July 1st, 25 people, 35 people, whatever, you're laid off. And that's obviously, as people could imagine in a post-COVID environment, is a very scary thought. You could understand the fear that comes from that. And so these things that people talk about, they're not done in a vacuum. And it's important to denote that. And it's important to understand what the loss of that is, because as someone who's worked here and lived here for some time, there's a noticeable difference in how Richmond police officers are. As the captain and the chief talked about, it's been, recognized throughout the United States. It's been a beacon of progressive policing for some time. And so when you play with that, then you run the risk of driving people away. And then who suffers? Well, the people who suffer will be the residents when they have a lot less of the type of police officers and people, the diverse workforce that we have that goes to other places, not a real transitional plan. And that's important to denote.
I think it's also, I just want to add a little bit to that. It's important to, and the reason why I am really afraid of losing the staff that I have now is it takes a really long time to hire police officers. The process is like a 6-month process just to get police officers hired. And then if they're young police officers, which don't have any prior experience, they have to go to the police academy, which is another 6 months to go to the police academy. Once they come out of the police academy, there's another 6 months of training that they do on before they're actually a solo police officer. So through attrition over the next probably 2 to 3 years, we're going to be losing probably 20 to 30, or I should say over 20 people that we currently have on our staff will be eligible for retirement. So through attrition, we're already going to lose from the top. And if we lose from the top and bottom, that's not going to leave us with much.
Wow. So there's a lot in the chats. There seems to be a lot of people, just so you know, I don't know who's looking at, how many of you are looking at these, but there's a lot of people who didn't realize there's any conversation at all that's been going on about defunding the police. And it seems like there's a fair amount of people who are quite surprised by that and want to get involved with city council because they don't feel like that's a good idea. Cheryl, you had your hand up, and Lisa, you have your hand up. If you guys, we've only got about 24 minutes left, and if you could type your question, I'd just like to try and keep this moving because we don't have a lot more time. I'm sorry to do that to you, but if sometimes, anyways, if you could type me your question, I'll put it out there. But what I wanted to ask, so what I've heard being said by Chief and by Captain Simmons and by Officer Ben is that that there are a lot of good ideas in what the Reimagining Committee is talking about. And so I guess what I would want to ask is, so what are the good ideas there that you would like to see happen? And then let's be specific. What are the bad ideas in that? So what do we not want to see happen? But what are the good ideas? Because I'm hearing you say, you know, there's good ideas. We'd like to see this. And so what are some of those good ideas?
So I would say actually the majority of the ideas are good ideas. You know, funding SOS, funding ONS, funding youth job services. I think those are all great ideas that need to be funded. We need to have a resourceful community so that people can actually thrive in our community. I would think the only negative thing would be to defund the police department. I think that there's other ways to fund these programs and projects.
Okay, Captain, you want to add anything?
I couldn't say it any better. That's exactly the case. I think every proposal that's been put forward it stands on its own merit, and they're all wonderful. Having a truly inclusive conversation to include the police department, we could help find funds in other locations, whether it's Measure X or grants or COVID relief money that's coming. I mean, there are opportunities to find other funds, but I think they're all worthy causes and they all would be excellent. The big point is I just don't think it should be one or the other. I think the city of Richmond deserves a robust, healthy police department and this pool of community services. So I agree with the chief.
Gotcha. Officer Ben, anything on that note?
No, I totally agree. You know, Mr. Barth's here. This group does good work. ONS does good work. In the Department of Children and Youth, you know, they have a funding source that I actually helped, you know, was on the ballot statement for. I mean, I'm a big believer, and then I think that I believe in the tremendous potential that exists in this city, in the city of Richmond. But I think people deserve all of that, and I don't think it has to be a choice. So I agree with the chief and the captain.
There's actually other things in the proposal that, you know, you probably wouldn't think that we agree with, but I as the chief do, and those are that we should actually minimize our contacts in our vehicle stops and not stop people that traditionally are impacted because they're low income for minor violations like not having registration or, you know, a minor cracked windshield or something like that. And we should focus on things that actually cause harm to our community, like primary collision factors, speeding, and some of those other things. So those are some of the other proposals that are being made that I do additionally agree with. There were a couple that were presented last week that weren't presented last night, so I'm not sure where they're going with it. But one of the things that I did not necessarily agree with was that we shouldn't have any impact on prostitution, because not everybody that's out there working as a sex worker wants to be. There's a lot of human trafficking that's going on, and we've actually rescued a lot of children from human trafficking by trying to impact the issue of prostitution. And so if we were no longer able to try to work on the human traffic, work on the prostitution efforts, then that would leave a lot of children at risk of human trafficking. So that was one of the things that I heard last week, but I did not hear last night. So I'm not sure where they are with that one.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you. Yeah, I'm just going to read Cheryl. What she wanted to kind of say was, as a longtime NPO leader and 40-year Richmond resident, I am concerned that the reduction in police funding will seriously impact youth. They assist with the reduction of sexually explicit minors, with youth crisis mitigation, with conflict resolution, and I want to squash this proposal. Transition needs to go forward with planning, data collection, etc. Sexually exploited minors. So anyway, so yeah, so Cheryl doesn't want to see the police defunded.
And I should add, I mean, she brought up the youth programs, and I am against criminalizing youth. I mean, there are some times that we have to arrest youth and that have been involved in some serious crimes, and that's the only time that I feel like, as a public safety measure, we have to arrest youth. But many of the other times, and we've actually created a diversion program here in Richmond so that we can keep youth out of the criminal justice system. Programs like that will suffer, and then we would have no choice but to send those cases over to the district attorney's office for prosecution, because we would not be able to carry out the diversion programs that we've put in place to keep actually young people out of the criminal justice system. So that's another concern.
Gotcha. Thank you. Thank you. What about, you know, one of the things that they've talked about is maybe, you know, sending mental health workers instead of officers, or mental health with officers. What are your thoughts on that? What are the proposals on that? Your thoughts?
Yeah, I think that they can actually have a significant impact on some of the mental health calls. However, I think that there's a lot of misunderstandings about mental health calls. A lot of them don't come into our dispatch center as mental health calls. They come in as some type of other call that ends up being a mental health call. The other thing is, not everybody has the authority to 5150 somebody. That can only be done by certain people that are authorized to do so. So my, I don't want to say my fear, because I'm not necessarily fearful, but I believe that the police will still have some type of role in responding to many of these mental health calls, even if they're nonviolent type of calls, because we would need to do the paperwork to actually put somebody on a mental health hold. So there's still going to be a role for police department in these calls. Additionally, we have the connectivity with the county. So if the city does their own mental health team, they don't have the connectivity with the county so that we can actually work together to see the history of this particular patient, so we could get all the relevant information before contacting and connecting with the mental health patient. I would rather see a co-response model where we have mental health workers, and then we have police officers that can stand in the background and only, you know, interject when absolutely necessary. Because I think for many of these calls, we're still going to have some type of role that we'll have to respond to.
Gotcha. Thank you. Yeah, I think that's something, I appreciated your input on mental health. And yeah, I think, I think, right, always agencies can do better, but county does pretty good right now with mental health. And so, yeah, I could see it being counterproductive for somebody else to try and take that on, in a sense, on their own, when counties, I mean, again, they can do better, don't get me wrong, but they're doing a pretty good job. Let's see here. So in talking about funding police, that sort of thing. So in other cities, one of the things that has been discussed regarding reimagining or defunding, or one of the reasons given that people want to kind of reorganize or de-imagine the police, is because they say, you know, I guess, and I'm really not, I don't know a whole lot about this, so I'm asking you guys, but there's like a lot of like police unions controlling funds, money going to that. And so, I don't know, salaries skyrocketing, and then, you know, money's not being available for other things. Can any of you guys speak to that?
Yeah, I'll give it a stab, Ben, and I'll hand it off to you. So I could tell you from the Police Management Association side, we don't control any funds whatsoever other than our members pay dues out of every paycheck, and that those dues are primarily spent on insurance expenses, other benefits that the union offers, financial estate planning, legal defense fund, things of that nature. And then we also amount a little bit of a savings because we like to contribute to local Richmond nonprofit efforts like PAL and the toy drive giveaway. And recently we donated to the Stephen Lacey Foundation, who gave toys away. So we like to have money in the bank to be able to support on an annual basis a lot of the local Richmond nonprofit organizations that are giving back to the city of Richmond. In fact, those are really great opportunities that a lot of our members, a lot of the captains and lieutenants will come out and they'll volunteer to serve in a lot of those alongside the POA members will serve the community on a volunteer basis. So from our perspective, there's no shifting of funds. We negotiate our contract, our memorandum of understanding that regulates our benefits, our pay, and how the city will treat us and things of that nature. And all of that is predicated on the marketplace. So like any job market or any other market where you're trying to buy a house or a car, whatever the case might be, the market dictates what something may or may not be worth. And that's, as a union president, that's how we view our MOU. We look at the market for what our job is, not just in Richmond, but in comparable cities. And we want to not be at the top, but we don't want to be at the bottom. And we look to try to negotiate to have a fair contract that's representative of the job we do, the risk we take, the training we have, the responsibility we have, the expectations that the community has on us, that's relevant to like cities that are in our region, comparable cities. And that's really the extent of the money side of things and what our purpose and role is.
Gotcha. Officer Ben, you want to add to that?
Yeah, no, the marketplace dictates what people try to ask for in contracts. Like any labor union in the United States, police unions don't control money with cities. I don't know where that's coming from, but they negotiate. You try to negotiate a salary and benefits, and that fluctuates. And it fluctuates with the market. And quite frankly, we're in a place where we're in the bottom end of our market. And that obviously, cities are not the Federal Reserve. They can't print money. So, there you have to, adapt and change to those things as time goes on. But I think what happens a lot of times is you see exorbitant overtime figures. And a lot of times that gets treated like people got the money for free, which is not the case. And people worked many hours, unfortunately, to for that amount of money. But the problem is when you don't have enough people who can do the work, then that increases the overtime. And so a lot of times that looks very negatively. And I think police officers and police unions get hit hard about that because it does. And there's different ways to curtail that. And the chief has worked hard to do that. But then with feedback and giving back to the community, the POA and the PMA, donate thousands of dollars and many hours and participate in many different types of nonprofit organizations within the city to also try to give back, because a lot of times it's very tough for us. We are often inserted into moments of crisis, and a lot of us like to have experience within the city where we're not coming into a moment of crisis with folks, and that's a way and an opportunity for police officers to do that. And that's important, and it's part of the culture here that the chief talked about, and that's an important thing that we try to impart on our officers who come here, that there's those civic values and those community values. And I think that in just to answer, I saw some questions in the chat just about a lot of our officers the majority of officers do not live in the city, but a lot of them grew up here or lived here for some time. So you have a lot of people like that. They just don't live here anymore. And a lot of that has to do with the school system. It's something that we obviously can't control.
Yeah. I heard that one of the proposals of the Reimagining is that kind of demanding that Richmond fire or police officers live in Richmond. Is that even?
It's illegal.
Yeah.
It's illegal. It was found to be illegal by the Supreme Court years ago. I think there's a lot of, as someone who lived in the city for some time, I think there's a tremendous benefit to it. But it's a very hard thing to do. And I could talk at length about how hard that is. But I mean, it's very hard for folks because of the issues of working and living in the city that you police. Sometimes people get upset at the decisions you have to make. Sometimes there's threats and things that come to you and your family. And sometimes the school districts and the things that you see that are happen within the city might not align with your values. And so and sometimes it's the cost too. And that's a thing as well, the costs of things. And so to obviously offset that and live with a different type of arrangement, because you can only afford so much, well, then that's also a thing as well. I mean, just the same type of things that affect everyday folks on their decision making for why they live or work where they do, it affects cops as well.
Yeah, gotcha. Can you speak really quickly? So, I mean, yeah, one thing that happens, right, is that so officers have a salary or whatever, they're set at a certain thing, but then there's overtime, and the overtime can be a lot. Why? I mean, I think I know the answer, right? But why are officers asked to do so much overtime?
I think I would say because we've been so short-staffed, but that's not exactly the answer either, because overtime has been steady for many years now. And I understand that it's a big point of contention within our community, and that's understandable. Let me talk about some of the ways overtime is used. So investigations. So when somebody is shot and severely injured, or there's actually a homicide, like I talked about before, the 9 officers that are working at the time on the street cannot investigate a homicide. It will take the entire team. There will be nobody to respond to calls for service. So if it's after hours, not during the time that investigators work, investigators are actually called out on overtime to start the investigation. Now, if anybody's watched any police shows, First 48 or anything like that, as you know, following the leads right after a homicide is very important. And that's what's most likely going to get you to arrest a perpetrator, because you're following those leads right away to catch somebody as quickly as possible. So sometimes those detectives have worked all day and they might be on their way home and a homicide happens at 7 o'clock at night. They turn around, come back, they work all the way through the night on those homicides. And I think there's a lot of moving parts. So if a homicide happens, if there's witnesses, then we have witnesses brought to the police department. There's, people have to sit with the witnesses. There's so many moving parts in those types of investigations that call for the need of multiple people to come in to handle those. So that's just a homicide. Same thing with a sexual assault. If somebody's raped, we want to be able to catch the person as quickly as possible. We're calling in people if it happens after hours. Missing persons. I mean, we had a significant missing person case this year that we've been working on, 17-year-old Antoine Whitley, who we still haven't found. And we spend significant amount of overtime and just time and effort in trying to locate Mr. Whitley, that literally hundreds of hours of overtime, boats on water every day, teams on bikes going around the bike paths looking for him, because we know that these issues are important to the community and we want to find him just as much as everybody else wants to find him. So that's not the only missing person call we had, though. This year in particular, we've had like 7, 8, 11-year-olds, 12-year-olds run away from home. So at a certain age, if it's not, 15, 16, 17, which we would just normally take a report unless there's some, circumstances that will call for somebody to come in and look. But if they're at a certain age, 11, 12, 13 years old, we call that at risk. They're significantly at risk. So we immediately call a team in to do everything that we can to search for these missing juveniles. Alternately, sometimes we have older people missing, Alzheimer's patients. And we, again, call in people to look for these people because we know that they're at significant risk. So that's just more investigative. We have court overtime. Many officers work the weekends, work at night, and they write reports and they have to go to court. That's something that we're subpoenaed. We are, by law, have to respond to court. And so officers receive overtime to go to court during their days off. A lot of them don't even want to go to court on their days off, but they are subpoenaed and they have to go. Festivals and events. So we have several major events here within the city that we spend a significant amount of overtime on. Cinco de Mayo event, where it's a 3-day event where we're shutting down the street on a Friday and, you know, parade on a Saturday, which we have them close off streets. And that's traffic, you know, there's a lot of moving parts to all of those operations, those festivals and activities. And so, you know, we don't just have a team that's ready to, you know, have fun at festivals. It's people that are not on duty and not responsible for responding to calls that are going to be working those particular events. And there's several of them. Cinco de Mayo, Juneteenth, we have 3rd of July fireworks, we have National Night Out. There's several events like that that take up a significant amount of overtime here. Community problem solving, as Captain Simmons talked about a little earlier, we have over 70 community projects that that our patrol officers are working on. They can't all be worked on during normal business hours because sometimes they take longer, you know, problem solving, working with a lot of different departments that patrol officers just don't have the ability to do. So, you know, sometimes they ask for a certain amount of hours on overtime to come in to address these particular community problems. And then there's some other problems that exist too. Fireworks is a huge one. I get hundreds of emails and phone calls about the fireworks that we have throughout the city. I have people telling me every day that I don't care about them. I don't care about the city because I'm not doing anything about the fireworks. And so for the last few years, we've had teams of officers coming into work specifically to address fireworks and gun violence, specifically around 4th of July and New Year's. And, you know, we just don't have these teams sitting around waiting for something. These are officers that are volunteering to come in during their days off to work these special enforcement operations. So those are some of the ways that we use overtime. Some of them, yes, we can take away, and the impact will be the community could complain about these issues and we won't address them. But some of them we can't take away, like the investigative parts and court overtime and minimum staffing. So we have 9 officers on a team and 2 people call in sick and 1 person's on vacation, then that's 3 people that will have to come in to fill those spots because we always have to have at minimum 9 officers working in the beats.
Gotcha. I want to say, so we're getting close to the end of time here. I want to say thank you very much to everybody who's been involved, Chief, Captain Simmons, Officer Ben. Really appreciate. There's been a lot of really good answers here. And in fact, I'm going to go back. This is going to be posted on the internet, and I'm going to go back and watch some of this because there was really some good information. I don't want to see the police get cut. I'm going to just say it right out. And my, in working with organizations and different things, I find that the better you train people, the better the organization becomes. The more you spend on your employees, the more you invest, the better they become. And I believe it would be the same for you guys. It's kind of, it's my own opinion, but I hate to see cuts because I think that's just, rather than when we start talking about some of these things that are going on where we want to see change, we need to invest in that change rather than cut and hope that the change is going to happen. Chief French, you know, I guess my last question is, can we as a community help the police accomplish your core mission of protecting, of serving? How can we as a community help you?
I would say to get involved. Again, we have a community policing model that focuses on the partnership with the community to address community issues, problems, and crime. And so to get involved, to show up at neighborhood council meetings, and even if you can't show up, just email. All of our emails for the police department are available. We want to hear what you have to say. We want to know how the community wants us to police you. We have to work in partnership on that. So get involved, let your voice be heard, work in partnership with us so that we can come to the best community policing model we can have here.
Yeah, thank you. Captain Simmons, you want to add anything?
Yeah, I would just echo what the chief said. And in addition to having your voice be heard with the police department, when you see an officer driving around or walking around, or whether it's your beat officer, or whether you're out and about, take a moment just to either introduce yourself or make known a situation that might be concerning you. And I think you'll find that a lot of the officers are very friendly, and they actually look forward to that engagement, and they want to build that relationship. So I would encourage you to do that. One of the definitions of community that I talk about all the time around the police department is community is a group of like-minded people. And I really believe that the more we interact with one another, the greater our opportunity is to become like-minded and be able to feel like we're all community. And so I look forward to seeing that happen.
Thank you. Yeah, Officer Ben?
I just want to echo that community engagement. It's a key piece of community policing. It's a concept that we're all very big believers in, and we want to uplift that and push that out and make that the priority and keep that as our priority. And just know, people get into this job because they want to help people. And you're going to hear that from every cop you come across. That's the type of police people that we brought to the city, and we want to keep them here, and we want to keep the good positive strides that this police department has made, and keep them going in the right direction. And we need people's help to do that.
Yeah.
So.
One last kind of just it's maybe a kind of more of a personal thing. I really enjoy National Night Out. Are we planning on doing National Night Out this year, Chief French?
Well, we're waiting to see what the governor's going to do in regards to lifting any restrictions and what it might look like in the fall, what the numbers for COVID look like. So I think, in the next month or two, we'll probably have a final decision on whether we're going to do National Night Out. And we always enjoyed partnering with you and going down your fun slides and everything else you guys have, eating your popcorn and all the goodies at Hilltop Community Church. So thank you.
Yeah, no, my pleasure. But more importantly, even beyond just us, I feel like that's such a great opportunity for the community to connect. And I hope it can happen, because I think we need more connection. Everybody's been isolated. We need more connection. So, all right. Well, thank you very much, everybody. Don Gosney has been recording this. I set him up at the beginning, and then I blew it, and I missed maybe the first 4 minutes, but I'm going to be posting this on social media sites. Don will be as well. If you want that first 4 minutes, go to Don. And I just want to say thank you very much for everybody for being a part of this tonight. Really, 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 really appreciate your time. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you for inviting us.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Absolutely. My pleasure. And maybe we'll get to do this again sometime. All right. Good night, everybody.
Right.